Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Early 2000s. Me, a young lad of 12 years old staying with grandparents in Ohio. Grandpa and I spend a morning in town, running errands, picking things up for Christmas dinner, visiting the barber shop, etc. As we're out, it starts to really come down. Heavy snowfall. Freak storm. Grandpa says we'll have to cut our day short. Head back to the house where Grandma is waiting for us. On the way, we spot a figure on the side of the road walking in the opposite direction. Grandpa can't in good conscience let the guy walk in this weather. Stops and asks if he needs a lift but stops mid-sentence. Shoots me a concerned look, then asks the man to get in. Guy climbs into the back seat. He's a big guy with a huge beard and a 1,000-yard stare. He also stinks like feces. Grandpa whispers at me not to stare and physically forces my head forward. We drive for a while. The guy is stinking up the entire car and Grandpa and I are holding our breath when suddenly the smell is just gone and Grandpa busts a U-turn quickly. Confused. I'm fighting the urge to look back. Grandpa tells me it's fine, I can look, the man is gone. I turn and I'm hit with a megaton of WTFs. The bearded guy has disappeared. Ask Grandpa who that was. He says it's best not to talk about it and by his tone I can tell he means that I should clam up, so I do. As we pass the spot where we picked up the stinky bearded guy, I see another figure by the side of the road. My skin crawls and I think it's the same guy even though the snow is so bad that I can't see who it is. Grandpa accelerates a bit. We barrel right past the person. Don't say a word until we get home. Asked him about this a few times before he died, and he always said he'd explain it sometime, but never did.
I was a first-hand witness for a murder that was completely and entirely covered up and silenced in Barber County, West Virginia. Living in Billington, small town, August 1993. Working at the Laurel Mountain Inn. Inn is about to close. It's an hour until my shift ends. 3 guys come in, out-of-towners. Immediately recognize them as not from these parts due to their accents. 2 of them order, the other one hovers around them, not taking a seat. Seems to be on something. Not my job to care, just focus on cleaning dishes. Another guy walks in, open carrying a pistol. Now, at this point there are 6 customers inside, an elderly couple, the 3 out-of-towners, and the guy with the pistol. There's 3 workers inside, 2 are on break. I'm manning the counter now after having finished cleaning up. 3rd out-of-towner, the one who didn't sit down, casually strolls into the bathroom. Guy with the pistol unholsters it, shoots the 2 other guys. I'm completely shocked, freeze up. Vividly remember this one detail. His gun did not make a single sound. Holsters it. Casually strolls out, with the 2 out-of-towners dead in their seat. Immediately snap out of it as soon as he's out of the door. Elderly couple seem to be in a trance at this point. Call the police. They get there very quickly, and act really weird around me as I'm telling my story. They seem to not believe me. Tell them about the 3rd guy in the bathroom. They don't even go to investigate, but tell me there's no one in the bathroom. I'm feeling really nervous at this point, like they're suspecting me. They take away the bodies. I go to use the bathroom myself and to check for the 3rd guy. Nowhere to be found. When I walk out, all of the blood is gone, and the elderly couple have left too without touching any of their food. I contacted the police again the next day to ask about the situation, because it didn't sit with me right. I was told by the operator of the non-emergency rather matter-of-factly that there were no records of a murder in the Laurel Mountain Inn. I didn't have work the next day, so I decided to call up one of my friends who worked just across the road at the Midtown Motel and would have absolutely seen anyone enter. I asked him, he said he saw the 3 men enter, and the guy with the pistol, but his account of events is bizarre. He never saw the man with the pistol leave. He also said he could vaguely see the muzzle flash, and thought he heard something loud from the inn. He said he also didn't see any police cars pull up, but 2 unmarked black Cadillacs that police officers stepped out. Every single time I've tried to contact a newspaper with this story, or the police, I was turned down and addressed as a liar. It wasn't like they were merely skeptical. They addressed me flat out as if I was making it up and they knew it. They would never give any evidence that I was a liar if I tried to press them on it, and in general everything about this is suspect to me. I could be a schizo, I don't know, but I know as a matter of fact I saw a guy outright shoot 2 people in the middle of the Laurel Mountain Inn.
Might as well contribute. I have a few, so let's start with Black Shuck. Be me, going to do the Stalker Challenge. It's early August, I'm not going far, just to a local country park as work's eating my time. UK, so my sole weapon is my AKM bayonet, which is stored in my bag because I don't fancy being in jail. It takes ages for people to be gone. I encountered runners at 11:30. By midnight I am fairly sure the park is empty. March up the valley side towards my objective. As I'm reaching the gate at the end of the track, I hear a thundering of hooves to my right. There are some old electrical lights set up along the edge of the field here where a path used to be. Why? Don't know. I see, clearly, a red deer running towards me, and something behind it that my brain translates as a second deer. Same size, maybe slightly bulkier, for legs, etc. First deer jumps the fence and slams into the ground within easy touching distance of me and takes off. I'm in actual awe for a moment. Look for the second deer after a moment. Look around and see a massive shape slinking into the shadows. What.jpg? Loud, angry, snarling and growling erupts from the dark. I tactically crap myself and assess my situation. Only weapon to hand in my pocket knife. Actual weapons, shovel and bayonet, are in my bag. Bag is on my back. My brain processes all of this in 0.2 seconds and comes to one conclusion. My bag is making me look bulky and weird. Stand, feet shoulder width apart, and stare in the vague area the noise is coming from whilst making myself look as big and scary as possible. The standoff lasts minutes, but to me it felt like hours. Finally the thing just gives up and I feel a notable easing in the air as it leaves. Given the area, I was heading for a quick explore, then GTFO to a small overlook not too far away where I camp, bayonet in hand, all night. Pick related, I took it in the evening. I still walk through there sometimes at night, but I ensure to have a good knife in hand. My first encounter with spooky stuff in the outdoors came when I was a wee lad. Be me, camping with my family in North Wales. Campsite is a small family-run place that my family has been coming to since my mum was wee lass. After lights out I go to explore the camp. This was pretty usual for me. There are several fields, one of which is relevant here. The dog walking field is a field with long grass and a path running around its border. On one border there was a small wooded stream and myself and a few other children would cross the narrow but deep portion that bordered the field to play in the broad and shallow section in the trees by the fence that marked the edge of the site. There is some light from the main house, and from a couple of streetlights at the other edge of the field that illuminate the little country road. I decide it would be cool to see what it looks like at night and head on over for the gap we used to cross at. As I approach I feel my back prickle but brave through it, because you're a dumbass when you're a wee lad. I reach the crossing and something feels off. I look up into the trees above the stream. Two green eyes shine back at me, like cat eyes but bigger. I hear a snarling from the trees. Panic.avi. Run screaming back to my mum and dad who don't believe me. Don't go exploring at night anymore that holiday. It would be over a decade before someone would tell me about the big cat cryptids of the UK, and I firmly believe that's what I encountered that day. Be me, teenager, at school camp in the lakes. Sat outside our cabin with the others around a fire. Suddenly we hear a rumbling noise. Rumbling comes towards us, and passes underneath us. Everyone looks at each other in confusion. Teacher makes a joke about tunnel fires. Everyone shrugs it off and goes back to eating. Don't bring it up again. To this day I do not know what that was. We never spoke of it after that.
Interesting stories, Anon. Thanks for sharing. I'm fascinated by the black dog legends. We have them here in the States too, although the ones across the pond seem more terrifying. Have you ever had other encounters with black Shuck?
I might have, this summer gone. I walk a lot at night in the summer as it's too hot for my northern blood to still be enough to sleep. I was walking through what I roughly worked out was its territory, more of that in a second, and something big began to snarl and bark at me from uphill. I don't think this was it though, it didn't sound as big. Probably a fox, although it kept on at me until I left the area. As to the territory, I figured it out, ironically, earlier the year I encountered it. I was walking through there and suddenly started feeling really afraid. This is really unusual for me as I'm pretty confident and I know the area like the back of my hand, plus the dark doesn't scare me. Anyway, I had been feeling oddly nervous as I approached the area, but I didn't understand why. The feeling grew until it hit hard. I felt like I was being watched, hunted. The mist didn't help, but it was weird. I'm not used to feeling like that, especially in such a local area. I kept going until I reached the bridge. I considered crossing and heading to the fishing pond to sit like I sometimes do, but I couldn't shake that prickling down my back and the fear, so I turned up the path I was on when I saw the beast, a week or so later, and headed on up and out of the park. The feeling died off as I passed the old building I was planning to explore for the challenge, and had all but faded by the time I reached the old visitor center only 100 or so meters further. Based on this, I had a rough estimation of the northernmost extent of its range. I also thought I saw 2 red eyes in the mist across the veil, but that was probably my imagination. On a side note, I saw a UFO nearby last year.
Thanks for responding. Sounds spooky as F. There was a post on K a few weeks back that your post brings to mind. This Anon experienced that same inexplicable fear, being watched sensation you described. He was in a national park and wandered off the main trail. When he got back, a ranger found him and told him the area he'd walked through had been deliberately closed off. Anon told the ranger of the weird feeling he'd felt and the ranger reviewed some footage with Anon present. Anon saw himself on the footage. He was being stalked by a giant mountain lion. Care to share the UFO story if you're up for it?
I remain convinced that humans still possess a hint of the old sixth sense array that would have been vital for our survival when we were a younger species in the prehistory times. It's not something you can prove through science, and a lot of people dismiss it, but if you have ever been in that situation then you know it exists. It's a holdover, but without it we would never have survived. The UFO story. There's not much to tell here really. I was walking back from town a couple of years back and crossing the park, really just a field with a river on one side and some play equipment, behind my house when I noticed a triangle of bluish-white lights in the sky, just hovering there. Focusing on them I noted that there was a dark triangle shape between the lights, with the lights at the corner. Abruptly the craft accelerated away on a curve. It accelerated way too fast to have been anything modern, and way too fluidly. It also made no noise, and it was a quiet night so I would have heard something if it had engines of our current tech spec. Been thinking about any other spooky encounters Eve had whilst at work, but there's not much I can recall. I've heard voices a few times, impossible voices. Once in my own house, right behind me when I was the only one home. The other thing was the fingers on the hull. Back when I was between 16 to 18 I attended Myerscough College. Along the back there's a river, and upstream a weir that ran into a pool on the far side of the canal bridge. We used to go bathing up there, and it was fine when you were with people, but it felt wrong, not in the naughty way but in the creepy, something is not right here, when alone. There could be people on the other side of the bridge and it would still feel off, but it really became scary when there was noon around. I did dismiss it initially as just nerves, maybe some ancestral fear of still bodies of water which were opaque, as primordial predators could lurk in them. Anyway, at one point I found a kayak that had been washed down by the floods, and my class and I played about with it up there. Nothing really happened with other people, as I said, and we used to paddle around the pool. It wasn't deep, you could wade through it. 4 or 5 feet at the most I would say. A couple of times I went up there on my own with the kayak. Now, we had all swam in the pool, and it was empty. There were no underwater objects or protrusions. Shit, I waded through it. But when you were up there in the pool in the kayak, alone, you would hear noises, as though underwater twigs or fingernails were scraping on the hull. It was really creepy, and I used to get nervous about even paddling with my hands. We didn't have a paddle. To one side, the lower in the picture, there is a cutaway in the concrete basin for some vents or drains of some kind, and that always made me really nervous, even a little fearful. I pushed myself to wade to it once, and look at it, but I couldn't bring myself to step into it, even though it was relatively shallow compared to the rest of the pool. If it was just me I might have dismissed it, but it wasn't. A few classmates also mentioned that the pool was really creepy when alone, and that they had also heard the scraping too. Pick related, it's the pool.
When I was younger, I saw something very strange. My brother and cousins were with me. I was the oldest. It was broad daylight, 2 or 3 in the afternoon. We lived in the mountains of Southwest Virginia. We were out in front of our grandmother's house right by the road. Our great-grandparents' place was across the street. There was a creek that ran along the other side of the road with a lot of brush and weeds growing up all along the embankment. We had made a fire in a coffee can and were roasting things over it when all of a sudden a section of bushes across the street started shaking violently. There wasn't enough wind to do it. It stopped briefly, then started again. If it had been an animal or something, we could have seen it through the brush. It was so weird that I walked over to see what was causing it. When I got over to where it was shaking, something black dropped out of the bushes, down the embankment, and was just hovering over the creek. It was like a solid black cloud of smoke that you couldn't see through, and it was undulating over the creek. We could tell it was watching us, but I think we were too scared to move. Then it suddenly moved away from us really fast, not in a straight line, but it zigzagged backward very fast. When it did that, we all screamed and ran back to our grandmother's house. The only thing I've seen since that looked like that was in the TV series Lost. The black smoke monster looked like this thing we saw. We saw it in 1983 or 1984. I didn't mention anything about eyes, because I didn't see any eyes. But other people in the same area have seen this big black shapeless thing enough times that they even had a name for it. They called it Bush, and they reported that it had glowing red eyes. Maybe the eyes were visible at night or something, but I saw it during the day. I doubt it was even a physical thing, but it was definitely able to connect with physical things, like the bushes it was shaking.
This story is only partly a first-hand account. Events that may have led up to this point come from my friend group at the time. They were trustworthy, but I only saw this thing once. A lot of the really intense encounters with the paranormal for me were in these woods beside where my friends lived. As for the previous events, basically I had this one friend who had had many encounters and dealings with various beasties, and I learned a lot from him. The other 2 friends believed, but not as deeply, and poked hornets' nests often and just did all-around stupid stuff. Found this old book on satanic witchcraft, not that that in of itself is stupid, drawing sigils willy-nilly, pronouncing Latin wrong, started doing drugs experimentally, cocaine and heroin, but stopped, and cleaned up, but they still did stupid stuff. They wanted tangible proof of this sort of thing. They found an abandoned shack in the woods, drew some summoning circle in red spray paint in a window, and put some of their blood on it and did a ritual of some sort. Nothing happens. A couple of weeks go by and they are walking through the woods and they get all panicky for no reason, like their flight or fight goes into overdrive, and they get lost from the panic and see this thing in the treetops following them. They finally make it back home and tell my other friend, the intelligent one, what happened, and he thought they were just freaking out and it was probably nothing. Another week goes by, during which they tell me, and we all make plans to hang out. We were outside chit-chatting, smoking cigars, and enjoying the night. All of a sudden I happen to look across to the other apartment building and I see what looks like this massive hand gripping the roof and see this tail swaying, but it's giant. I asked them if they saw it too, and they did. We go around trying to debunk this. The trees were down a hill and weren't visible from the other side, but then I saw these bright blue eyes look at us on a massive head. We go back towards where we were in case we need to bolt inside, and we can see better in the light. We keep watching, and this very muscular arm hoists up this thing on top of the roof and it lays across it like a 15-foot-long muscular cat. It was dark, so it's hard to say for certain of the color, but it didn't have fur and it looked dark gray. The head looked like it had horns, but again it was dark. There was definitely something there, but we weren't sure what. It gets off the roof and hears it slide on the gravel down the hill and tear back off into the trees. Nothing else spectacular happens that night, and so ends my personal account. However, they told me later that the 2 buddies, who did the so-called ritual, got so freaked out, went back to the shack and destroyed the circle with a rock and didn't close the summoning. They refused to go hiking there anymore after they told us that they saw this 15-foot-tall, skinny gargoyle, no wings and blue eyes with no pupils, chased after them when they tried to go in. Something freaked them out because the edgy Satanist and militant atheist started attending evangelical Christian churches. The only thing I know for certain is what I saw, The rest could be completely made up. I researched Ozark cryptids but couldn't find anything that matched. My more experienced friend said he thinks they did summon a demon and severed its way back / hold they had on it so it attacked. I really don't know what it was.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.